Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us in our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgili, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and joining us today are Mr. Sean O'Donnell, who's Assistant Chief of Public Health Services from our Department of Health and Human Services, as well as Ms. Christine Hong, who is the Chief of Services to End and Prevent Homelessness. Our guest this afternoon is Robert Butts, who is the owner of Winrich Vineyards here in Montgomery County. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, Mr. County Executive. Good to see you. Good afternoon. The floor is yours.
Good to be here, and thank everybody for joining us. The annual point-in-time count is a census of unhoused individuals in our county. It's required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for communities who are receiving federal funding. And since 2007, HUD has mandated both sheltered and unsheltered point-in-time counts annually. Many of you on this briefing are familiar with this process, and maybe have even covered it when advocates and volunteers go out in the late night and early morning in the heart of winter to count those who are living without shelter. On a regional scale, we collaborate with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, or COG, as we refer to it for short, on this issue. And their regional report based on the PIT count is going to be released in a few weeks. Today, however, we'd like to focus specifically on our numbers because we just got them. We've seen a significant 47% decrease in homelessness impacting families. Just a year ago, we were facing an 80% surge in family homelessness because of post-pandemic economic instability, the eroding safety net, the fact that rents are still too high, and the fact that the courts are getting caught up with eviction proposals, and so the number of evictions has been rising. We didn't just throw up our hands, though. We invested significantly into the short-term housing and resolution, or SHARP program, that we have. And let me tell you why SHARP is the smartest investment in this county. It provides a real bridge to stability. SHARP just doesn't put somebody in a temporary hotel room. It provides a security deposit, a 12-month rental subsidy, and navigation services for an apartment. It gives families breathing room they need to live while they stabilize their lives and they're living in a home rather than a shelter or a motel. Since we started this in early 2025, SHARP has helped over 300 households finding permanent housing. That's more than 1,000 adults and children who have stability of a home again, which is an incredible success. It's more humane, and it's cost-effective, and more cost-effective than motels. Our motels, putting a person in a motel is costing us north of $30,000 a year. Today, there are 60 families experiencing homelessness who remain in motels, which is why we're well below our funding limit of 75, and we continue to try to get more people placed, but we have to find places who will take these people because obviously many of these folks can't qualify for a rental apartment on their own. By moving families into permanent housing faster, we reduce the trauma of homelessness for children, and then we save the taxpayers from the higher costs of the long-term emergency shelters we use. Some of the council are quick to see the success and uses an excuse to redistribute $2 million I requested for SHARP in the 27 budget. That would be a mistake. If we don't fund this in the 27 budget, our capacity to help new families will drop by 68 households. Those families will end up right back in our shelters and overflow motels. Most of all, you actually want us to spend this money and to knock that number of people who are not in hotels down. We need to knock that number down. By knocking that number down, we'll actually spend less than we spend in the SHARP program. So that would not be a cut worth taking. We still have work to do. Our family numbers are down. Our chronically homeless population, mostly individual adults, saw a 14% increase compared to 2025. One big reason is that there simply are not enough deeply affordable housing units available. That's the reality of the county. My administration's plan is to take the success we've had with families and expand SHARP funding to help support individual adults. We also have to be vigilant because the winds in Washington are shifting. They're actually blowing against us. The Department of Housing and Urban Development is moving away from housing first models and cutting permanent housing solutions. They want to go back to temporary solutions like transitional programs, even though we know that housing first and programs like permanent supportive housing are the right approaches. We need permanent solutions. We don't need people to be in a shelter temporarily and then after a certain number of days get kicked out. This is not going to work, and it's not going to solve the problem. We see folks working every day at this, and the 96% housing retention rate for permanent supporters and the 96% retention rate for permanent supportive housing is proof that it works. Makes it possible for people to get work and to stay employed. I want to invite our Chief of Services to End and Prevent Homelessness, Christine Hong, to join us now to discuss the work we do every day within the Department of Health and Human Services and with our community partners to address this issue and to share our success over the past year. Thanks for being here, Christine.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. I'm so pleased to share the success of the SHARP program, and it truly is because Montgomery County has been united in housing solutions for families experiencing homelessness, and so many people were a part of this success, including, of course, you, Mr. County Executive. The proposed increase to the SHARP program started with you, but was supported by the full council. And then, of course, our Homeless Services for Families team, the SHARP team, and all of our community partners who serve families made that success possible. And I'm going to share a little bit of data now with everyone. Let me pull that up. Pardon me. Okay, so what you're seeing here is in the first set of bars, this is the data, of course, collected on the night of the point in time count on February 4th. You can see that between 2024, 2025, and 2026, our data is listed here in different colors. And for those who were counted, the total number dropped by 26%. So we counted 1,117 people this year. And amongst individuals, we also saw a reduction of 7%. We counted 742 individuals. However, it's when you look at people and families that you can see that we saw a 47% reduction. That's huge. The fact that we house so many people over the last year is truly a result of the SHARP program and all the work done and the support from our county. And I think what is noteworthy, as the county executive mentioned, is that the only number that went up this year is the chronic number. And these are largely individual adults who timed into chronic status as a result of us not having enough housing available for individual adults. So this is some of the work we have yet to do. And I wanted to highlight that here. And then let me move to the next set of data, which is the number of families that we house through the SHARP program. This program began when we started seeing an alarming rise in families experiencing homelessness, and the executive and the council supported a special appropriation back in late 2024, and we started the work of housing the families with those initial funds in February of 2025. So you can see where we started in that month, and we housed 21 families. And each month we have housed progressively more families. And this is a cumulative count. And as of today, we've housed more than 300 families. That's over 1,000 people, including adults and children. So huge amount of work done here. And we've basically housed as many people as were counted on the night of the point in time count. So that is an enormous amount of work. It also says that we cannot just have 1 year's worth of funding to end homelessness. We have to continuously house individuals and families who present in need of shelter, who are experiencing homelessness. So it's ongoing work. And in order to get to the reduction in families we saw this year, we actually had to house 3 times as many families as were counted in the night of the point in time count. So I just wanted to share that. I also want to show that as a result of the progress made with the SHARP program, we saw a tremendous reduction in our use of motels for sheltering. So this shows you that over the last year, we have reduced the number of families in the motels by 59%. And as the county executive mentioned, there are only 60 families currently in our motels. And that's a huge reduction from even just this past year, but over the last 2 years. So we want to continue this success. And I'm just so pleased with our efforts, and I know that we have to continue. So it is our hope that we will be able to increase the amount of sharp funding that we have, because that would allow us to continue the progress we've made in reducing the experience of homelessness for families. And it would also allow us to be in a position to start housing individuals with sharp if the reductions with families continue. This is incredibly important at this time because there are reductions to food stamps, Medicaid, and also likely our federally funded housing programs. So it is really important for us as a county to be prepared to continue to house those most in need. And I'm really proud of our county for making that commitment, not only to ensure that no family with children would sleep outside, but also to ensure that we would house them quickly so that their experience of homelessness would be as short as possible. And with that, I will stop and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Christine. Members of the media, if you have any question for Christine Hong at this time regarding the point in time count and homeless families in the county. I see Ms. Huckabee, Bethesda today. Good afternoon. Go
Hello.
ahead. Oh,
Um,
Judy?
I
Oh,
was first just gonna ask, would you be able to share that slideshow in the chat, for our reference?
I think so. I will check with our team, and I think that that's something we can do.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
that
Hey,
was your request.
Christine.
Okay.
Christine, if
Thank
you
you,
want to email
Judy.
that over to me, I'll make sure it gets into the chat before the end of the briefing.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Judith Hirth,
Hey.
she's with the Greater Olney News. Good afternoon, Judith.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. I'm sorry if I missed this or misunderstood it, but who are you counting? Are you counting people in shelters or in hotel rooms, or are you out looking in wooded areas where there might be an encampment?
Yes, thank you for that question. We do both. So the point in time count includes everyone who is in an emergency shelter, which includes emergency shelters for individual adults, as well as for families, as well as the motels we use for overflow sheltering for families, since we have only 27 placements for families in permanent family shelter. So that's why we rely on motels. In addition to that, it also includes any transitional programs because those are considered temporary solutions to homelessness, as well as safe havens, and then the unsheltered population. And in Montgomery County, we every year recruit a large number of volunteers who come out. And I know a number of you have participated in the point in time count and appreciate that. And so it is also a literal count of people who are observed sleeping outside,
Okay, thank you.
of course.
Thank you.
Can I add one thing,
Jeannie?
Judy, for your benefit? The county actually has a map that it utilizes during the point in time counts, where actually, like any place where we know that it's likely that homeless individuals may congregate or may be found, that actually we actually go and proactively check on the point in count evenings, and it shows a map of the across the county, and we have teams go out and check each of those locations, and if we do encounter people, count how many there are there.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stoddard. Jeannie Bixby, the banner. Good afternoon, Jeannie. Go ahead.
Afternoon. Thank you so much. Hi, Christine. I was curious if you could elaborate on, when folks are part of the SHARP program. I know that it's a very limited fund case situation. Like I know it's early rent, first time rent, things like that. Does the department keep data on like how many people are able to stay in their housing following that? Or do you ever see issues with like people who are returning to homelessness?
Yes, so we are tracking that, and because we started the program for families specifically um, just over a year ago, and it is a 12-month program, the data is still very early. However, I'll say that families are well equipped to increase their earned income as needed before the 12 months are over, and we continuously provide navigation services during those 12 months, monitor their progress, and are prepared to provide additional supports if needed. But most families do not need those additional supports. So it truly is a way for them to get housed quickly, to not spend a long period of time in shelter so that they can return to normalcy, especially families with minor children. It's so disruptive to be in the motels or to be in emergency shelter.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for clarifying.
Sure.
Thank you, Jeannie. Kate Ryan, WTOP. Go ahead, Kate.
Thank you very much. I wanted to check on how many children, again, how many minor children are among the counts that you're finding? And is that a result of the difficulty of finding, for example, folks who talk about rentals with a 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms? That's what I'm hearing here in DC. Many families who are, say, looking for apartments can't find any, even, out of their price range. What's the situation? And again, forgive me, but on the charts, how many children would have been among that count?
Sure. So we counted 217 children this year. That's a decrease of 200 from 2025, which is a 48% decrease. And to your question, absolutely, it is very hard for families to find larger units. And we are one of the things that our partners has developed, this is Bethesda Cares, is what's called a Rent Select database. And this is a database of landlords who they have recruited specifically to work with households that are exiting homelessness. So that's also been a part of the success. We are really appreciative of their efforts on the Rent Select database, but you're absolutely right, that can be a challenge.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. Sheila, I see your hand up.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
hi. Can you just talk a little bit more, Director Hong, about the county's use of hotels and how they fit into sort of the broader context of shelters and other options for housing folks?
Sure. So Montgomery County has 10 emergency shelters, 3 of which are dedicated to families experiencing homelessness. 27 families can be served in those family emergency shelters. And as you can see by our counts over the last several years, that has not been enough. And because the county commits to families with children not spending even a night outside, we need to use motels as overflow sheltering when our family shelters are full. And so the county has absolutely followed through on that commitment. And it can cause our sheltering expenses as a result of the motels to be very large. That is why the SHARP program is so important, because it's actually cheaper to help families to regain housing by providing rental assistance to them for 12 months than to shelter them in motels. So, though it is necessary as a crisis response to families, it is not cost effective, and it's also difficult for a family to live out of a motel room. We do it as a life-saving measure and to prevent families with children from being outside.
If I could just quickly follow up, you said there were 60 families right now in hotels. Are they spread apart between different hotels? Are they all in one hotel? Could you just talk a little bit about that?
That's correct. So we work with multiple motels in different locations in the county, and we try to place families where it's most convenient to them based on where their children are in school and factors like that. But yeah, it's not one motel, it's multiple motels.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. I see Judith has additional questions for Christine Hong. Go ahead, Judith.
I do. Thank you. I'm wondering if you're surprised by these numbers, given that a few months ago when we all chatted about homelessness and everyone was a bit concerned about with changes going on in the district and what the administration was doing down there, that we didn't know what impact it might have, homelessness might have on Montgomery County. Are you at all surprised that these numbers have not drastically increased?
I wouldn't say I'm surprised, but that's because I'm involved in the work every day. And that is because Montgomery County made a very conscious effort to invest into housing solutions for families. And as a result of all the hard work and the support that's gone into that, I could see that we were housing a large number of families, as indicated by the data I shared with the SHARP program. So I wouldn't say it's surprising, but we're also not relaxing because we know that there are many factors working against low-income households, including the reductions of federal resources like food stamps. So families are having to choose between paying rent and putting food on the table. These are impossible decisions. And we know that it can contribute to households being unstable in their housing because they can't afford to pay rent. So the work will continue, and we foresee more challenges coming our way because we expect reductions in our federally funded permanent housing programs. And so it will continue to put pressure on families, on households, on the verge of homelessness. And so our work continues to be significant, which is why we need the additional funding for SHARP this year.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. Members of the media, any additional questions for Christine Hong this afternoon? Okay, I see Shirley has her hand up. Go ahead.
Sorry, one more. I just am wondering, can you speak a little bit about the sort of accuracy of this data? I mean, I know I've heard from, homelessness providers in other counties that it can be difficult, especially when you're talking about the unsheltered population, to know exactly where people are at a given time, and that those numbers oftentimes are maybe lower than what's actually there. But I don't know if that's the case in Montgomery County or if you're fairly confident that, you all counted everyone.
Yeah, it's a really great question. I appreciate you asking it because it is a one night snapshot, and there are factors that can make the count not indicative of a full year's data. So we check both. And we know based on our year-round data, our motel usage, the number of families in emergency shelter continuously going down over the course of the year, that the reductions in families is accurate. However, I didn't go into detail about the unsheltered number, which also, according to the night of the point in time count, went down by 48%. Now, we know that weather was a huge factor. For those of you who were out there with us, it was icy, it was extremely cold, sub-freezing temperatures. And our outreach partners had been urging people who were sleeping outside to come indoors into shelter or to stay with friends. So that number, we believe, is significantly reduced because of the extreme cold. There are other factors. We've also been doing a great job housing people who are unsheltered. We have a street to home program, which is targeted towards people who are unsheltered and helping them to get housed straight from, being outside into permanent housing. So there are successes. However, our outreach data across the year shows an increase in people who we've served through outreach services. So that's not a number that I'm as confident in. And I would say that the weather played a major factor in that number on that night.
Thank you so much. That's helpful.
Of course.
Thank you. Any more questions for Christine? Okay, thank you. Mr. County Executive, I think we can move on to our next topics. Please unmute.
So we have other problems here, and I think some people know that we are now in a climate drought issue in Montgomery County, and I think 10 other counties in the state. Climate impacts are creating drought and freezing conditions have just had a major impact on our ag community. Normally, we wrap up another Earth Month on a high note with Greenfest, which I attended this past weekend, and the Energy Summit in Silver Spring. But sadly, I have to bring up some bad news or concerning news to share about growers in our ag reserve. Frosty temperatures last week devastated many crops. Farmers can only do so much about late freezes. They have warnings and they have warming devices in some cases and techniques to protect vegetation, but that can only do so much. Temperatures were too far or too low across the Mid-Atlantic region for long stretches of time. Farmers in the county estimate 80% of blackberries and 60% of apples and cherries are gone. The frost also hit developing peaches, grapes, and baby fir trees hard. Farmers who have reached out to us and spoken with the media call the damage catastrophic. That said, they said this will impact next year's yield, but not necessarily what will be available this spring, summer, and fall. Our ag reserve was created in 1980, and it encompasses 93,000 acres and supports roughly 350,000 jobs and contributes $8.25 billion in economic impact during a normal year. At last count, there were 42 farms specializing in fruit and orchards, which contribute to about $71 million in market value sold by our local farmers in 2022. But clearly, this will not be a normal year. You can see this lovely map of the state of drought in the Potomac Basin. And we are looks like we're in that dark orange zone, between the dark orange and the lighter orange zone. And so we're in definitely a serious situation. Another monkey wrench from Mother Nature is the rain. And we're grateful to see some rain today, though it doesn't seem like very much. Through the end of April, our area had only received about 11 inches of rain for the year, which is 2 inches below our average. In fact, the entire DC region is in the same boat and has been for a while. The U.S. Drought Monitor shows 8 of the past 12 months have been drier than normal. It's going to take several major suckers to pull us out of this drought condition. Most of the county and 46% of the state are experiencing severe drought, which ranks in the middle of a scale of 1 to 5. In 2002, the drought caused smaller streams to dry out. It reduced stream flow and led to more salt in the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries, which led to fish kills and invasive species. Agriculture has been impacted by droughts and periods of lowered rainfalls, leading to livestock sell-offs and lower crop yields. Drought can also impact our water supply. The situation can reach the level of water restrictions to ensure that we have enough water for everyone, but thankfully we're not there yet. On the bright side, I'd say that there is a commission that is actually studying the needs for water in the Potomac River Basin, and I believe there's a pretty firm belief we're going to need to add additional water resources, reserves to this area. Right now, I want to introduce Robert Butts, the owner of Windridge Vineyards in Darnestown, and his family-owned farm has been around for more than 50 years, even though they only started growing grapes for wine in 2011. So, Robert, how's this cold weather impacted your business and other farmers in our area?
Yeah, no, thank you for reaching out. I just want to say on behalf of the farmers, I really appreciate the executive highlighting this issue. So for Windridge, yeah, I mean, there's really just no way to sugarcoat it. On the grape side of our business anyway, pretty much 100% of any living tissue was frosted off on that morning of the 21st. The vines do have some limited ability to rebud, so they can protect themselves, but those secondary buds tend not to be fruitful. So we're looking at very substantial crop loss here, which, as the executive correctly points out, because we're a winery and we work, I'm not selling wine that I produce now. I'm going to produce this vintage in the fall and sell it next year and in the out years. So it's really an issue that will affect us for several years to come.
Okay, so we're ready to open up for additional questions for Mr. Robert. But regarding, I see Kate Ryan, WTOP. Go ahead, Kate.
Hi, I'm glad you brought up when and how consumers might see how you've been affected there. Again, so if they want to come and visit, and you do visit and events and things like that, does that end of the business still hold up? And do you have much inventory to carry you through to help kind of blunt the effects of what you've been through this year?
Right. That's a great question, and I'll give you an answer as it relates to Windridge, but the experience at a frost event is going to be different for every farmer, right? So in the early days of growing grapes, I was a grape grower. I didn't produce any wine. So this event would have basically meant I would have lost all my income on grapes for the year. And that is the case for many people that grow peaches, apples, strawberries, the crops that the executive pointed out. They're just not going to have those to sell. In the winery, it's a little bit different because, you grow grapes to make wine, and good wine requires some cellaring. So to answer your question is yes, we've been preparing for this over the years, and we do have some inventory. So essentially now though, that's going to kind of set us all back, and we'll be working the next 5 years or whatever to try to climb out of this event, if that makes sense.
Does. And then what if I know that people in Montgomery County and who come from out of the area to visit these farms and buy on the farms, for example, through CSAs and things like that, if they want to help farmers weather this, pardon the use of that phrase, but what can they do to support the farmers that are local? I know that's a big selling point.
Yeah, so I really appreciate that. And so I think it comes down to, not every farm may not have exactly everything that the customer was used to getting in years past, right? But now more than ever, we all of us need the business, right? The best way to help a farmer through a crop loss event or other thing like that is income, right? Ultimately, it's commerce that allows our businesses to survive. And even though maybe one or a couple of things may not be in stock, there's still tons of great produce, and in Windridge case, lots of good wine. So we're definitely, definitely please keep coming out to see us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. I see John Finley from Fox 5 DC. Go ahead, John.
This is Gwen. I just wanted to ask Mark, is the government doing anything to help financially support the loss that the growers are having?
We don't have any kind of fund that we would be able to draw out of that I can think of to work on that. I mean, the federal government, I don't know, you guys covered by crop loss protections through the federal insurance like other farmers are?
So the crop insurance coverage for specialty crops is very patchwork. It's nowhere near as well developed as it is for traditional commodity row crop. So the short answer is really no. Most of us just take the risk.
So there's your answer. This
Yeah,
is not
look,
something the county's
it
ever
is what it
been.
is. I mean, we're farmers. This is it's difficult, but honestly, it is part of our business. And we do prepare for it, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt when it happens.
Okay, members of the media, any additional questions for Mr. Butts regarding farming and the ag reserve? No more questions? Mr. Butts, you can remain on this media briefing if you like, but if you need to depart, oh, I see. Fox 5 DC again. Do you have an additional question for him?
Just one more
Okay.
question, Robert.
Mhm.
Can you give us some numbers on the total financial loss just in this last round that you've had to endure, and if there's any comparison to the earlier dates in the month when we had other freeze days?
Yeah, so this is actually the second frost event that we've had this year. And I should remind everybody that the frost-free date in this region, which includes Montgomery County, is May 15th. So we are still not done. We have another 2 weeks of this roller coaster. The first frost event, at least the Windridge was able to largely escape. Our frost mitigation tools were effective, and also the vines were just beginning to bud out, so I didn't have a whole lot of tissue at risk. This event was really, really widespread. I mean, just in Windridge alone, income losses in the hundreds of thousands. And if you look at like across county-wide, it's millions, tens of millions, I think is probably not an exaggeration to say what this event really means for the region. And I should say this event was massive. It stretched from New Jersey down to North Carolina. So if you look at the farm impact region wide, it really is quite substantial.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Okay, Robert, if
Thank
you
you.
need
Thank
to
you, Robert.
depart, please feel free to do so. And have a great afternoon.
You too. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive.
So
We
yeah, I'm okay. I thought I was muted, but I'm not. Last week I was in Wheaton, where a new milestone for families is taking shape. Community leaders came together to celebrate a partnership that serves as a promise to our children. This event was a moment to thank the partners who made Central Nea's newest early childhood center possible. It's a project that says exactly what we can achieve when the agencies collaborate for the public good. High quality early childhood education is a necessity, not a luxury. I have said over and over again, this is probably the most important educational investment that we make. In a diverse community like ours, it's increasingly important because of the income issues that we have, but the cost of childcare is a problem pretty much for everybody. And it means that you have to provide, responsive services in our area, culturally responsive, bilingual, and inclusive are all parts of the kind of childcare programs we need to offer. Specifically serving children ages 2 to 5, this facility offers those comprehensive services. This is a major boost for the local workforce, and this facility will also provide childcare options for county employees who work in the building, making it easier for those who work in our community to ensure their children are safe and in their environments that are close by. On top of that, this facility offers comprehensive services that promote children's development and family stability. And that's quite the investment when you consider that it helps kids learn, it supports our working families, and strengthens our entire workforce. We often think of roads and bridges as infrastructure, but childcare is just as critical. Parents can't work without reliable, affordable care, and by investing here, the county's closing an economic and cultural gap, ensuring that every child has access to opportunity regardless of their home language or neighborhood. After getting its start in Silver Spring, the Wheaton location will be Central Nea's third center in the county. Building a stronger community starts with our youngest learners, and this foundation will help generations of families that call Montgomery County home. Other good news, we got some good news about Silver Spring and crime statistics. There was less crime reported downtown last year, significantly less. And I take you through some of the key areas of improvement. Gun assaults are down 53%, carjacking is down 35%, and overall crime is down 12%. Not only are the numbers telling a story, but so are residents and businesses. I want to thank the Banner for its article on the reaction to our lower crime numbers, and AB7 News for focusing on the improved numbers in our recent report. As good as this news is, we're not back to where we were before the pandemic. COVID knocked things back. The courts got overwhelmed. Officers couldn't be out there the way they needed to be. And people felt that around Ellsworth Drive along George Avenue and at the metro station. We are absolutely committed to driving these numbers lower. We've done a number of things. We've added patrol officers by paying for more overtime shifts, but we also got smarter about how to use technology. We're optimizing our drones as first responder program because they can feed real-time information to our police officers, keeping them safer and making us more efficient. The drones are not about surveillance. We dealt with that issue when we adopted the drone policy. They help us catch criminals and deter them from trying to target downtown Silver Spring. We also work with the shelters. We've got more unhoused neighbors inside. We passed legislation that said, hey, if you're serving alcohol at 4 a.m. and your block looks like a street fight waiting to happen, you need a safety plan. And that's just common sense. And we've worked with the businesses that were doing things they weren't supposed to be doing, and we've been able to put a lid on a bunch of that. The late night crowd was coming from outside the area and it was causing mayhem at 5 o'clock in the morning, and that's thinned out now. And the people who live here, who've been here and who love this community are telling us they feel the difference. Everyone deserves to feel safe, and that is the best recipe for seeing Silver Spring thrive. The more work we do on housing, on mental health services, on making sure we're not just pushing the problem from one block to the next, all those things make a difference. But we should also recognize the progress we've made. We are recruiting new police officers who want to help our community, and that's a goal we all share. I'm really happy with the direction we've taken with recruitment. I think everybody knows we are down a lot of officers. The next recruiting group is the first ones. The next two, I guess, will be the first ones where the rules have changed to make recruitment easier. So we're looking forward to hopefully larger recruit groups and dealing with the shortage in police officers we have. Before I open it up to questions, I'd like to give my staff an opportunity to provide updates they want to share. And we'll start with our health team.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. County Executive. There are no public health updates at this time. Turn it over to Dr. Stoddard.
Please unmute.
I just wanted to echo the county executive's comments about the work that's been done in Silver Spring. I know we've invested a lot in technology, but I think it starts really with the officers and them taking a really proactive approach in concert with our Health and Human Services and other partners to really try and get down to the behaviors and, really taking to heart sort of the feedback from the community that, they wanted certain activities to be safer. And I think that the officers particularly really deserve a lot of credit for the work that they've done. And frankly, they've done it in a way that has not resulted in a huge increase in the complaints of misuse of force or abusive policing that, obviously that is always a concern from the community. They've done it the right way and they deserve the credit for the changes that we've seen.
Thank you, Dr. Stoddard. Members of the media, do you have any additional questions for the county executive this afternoon? Kate Ryan, go ahead. You need to unmute, Kate. Please unmute, Kate, if you're talking.
I thought I had. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
So I want to double check on two things. Dr. Stoddard, you mentioned police doing it the right way. What kinds of strategies were being used to help shape the behaviors that they were seeing in the street and kind of put them in the right direction? Then I have a follow-up for the county executive.
So I think, my observation would be is that sort of, as we're coming out of the pandemic and sort of the national commentary that happened about policing, particularly in the post-George Floyd era, with a lot of the changes that were made, both state, local, and federal levels on policing. I think there was sort of a natural, I shouldn't say natural, but sort of a understandable pullback in the way that policing was done with regard to conducting traffic stops and things of that nature. And I think, we had conversations with the leadership and even with the line officers to say, hey, we're going to back you if you do it the right way, if you're going to follow the law, if you're going to do it the best way that you can. And so I think, if you've seen particularly the 3rd District Commander and other commanders have really started to do a lot more sharing on social media of some of the interventions that their officers have conducted, where they'll do traffic stops that result in significant firearms or drugs being taken off the streets. And, that sort of builds recognition that proactive policing, that it's done the right way, that isn't targeted by with racial animus or with a mistreatment in mind, like we've seen in other parts of the country. I think if you do it the right way, you can still do effective, proactive, community-based policing, build relationships with businesses and communities and community leaders, and keep people safe and not run into the issues that you do where you're being, where it's being suggested that you're doing targeting of particular demographics or particular streets or neighborhoods or people, which obviously is hugely problematic. And so I think the Montgomery County Police Department has really enhanced their policies and really shifted some of their, really focused on constitutional community-based policing.
Gotcha. So, Mr. County Executive, when we're talking about public safety, schools, obviously lately, big concern there in Montgomery County. I'm seeing, and forgive me if this is old news, but Councilmember Friedson is asking for the return of, he doesn't use the term SROs, but an officer in every high school, and then officers assigned to each cluster and on a permanent basis, much like the old SRO model. Is that something you would like to see? Are you guys in discussion about this? I know he reached out to the school leadership as well.
Well, we've been talking about this since before he wrote a letter, so that's nice. We're There are police officers in every high school, and they're there for opening, closing. They're there at lunchtime. They also have responsibility. They've picked up some of the schools close to the high schools in the cluster. So they're not there the entire day, but they were there for the times that everybody thought were the most important times when you had large number of kids um, coming in the morning, leaving in the afternoon, and during lunchtime, which gets very busy. Um, they're not out of the building necessarily all the rest of the time. So we've got them there, and I think people have misstated what the role of the officers are. If you're going to put do what he suggested doing, given the fact that we're short about 200 officers, you would pull however many people you think you're going to put in the clusters. How many Earl, do you know how many clusters it is? 23 or something like that?
It's like 28, but I think a handful of those clusters are covered by non-Montgomery County Police
Yeah.
Department. So Sheriff's Office, Park Police, Rockville, and Gaithersburg Police each cover one or more of the high schools in their territories.
So we'd have to basically reduce services to residents in the rest of the county in order to be able to put something in every of all the middle schools or in the clusters in the county. That's going to be really challenging, and we can't even solve it. I mean, aside from the fact he'd have to add officers to the complement, since we're below our full complement, you need another 20 or so officers. You have to put that in the budget. But obviously we're still having problems recruiting. And so even if we have successful recruit classes, even if we got up to 50 recruits a year, it would take more than 5 years. When you consider people retire every year, it would take more than 5 years to get us up to the level of staffing we need to be at. So I don't know if there's an easy solution, certainly not as easy as he thinks there is, to dealing with this problem. But do I philosophically disagree? No, I think having one for a cluster would be fine. That was the idea of letting the officers in each high school also pay attention or be available to the other schools in the cluster, so that you could actually achieve having some availability to cluster as well as having a concentration on the high schools.
So again, under
But
the
I gotta say
current,
one thing got to remember though, that I can't make the decision, and neither can the council, because by state law, this is the decision of the superintendent of schools, how they deal with safety in the schools. That is not a decision made by the county.
has the superintendent talked to you about this? Is it something he would like to see? Has he expressed that to you?
He hasn't talked about this specifically. Earl, have you had anything
Well,
different?
he expressed actually in response to Councilmember Friedson's request that he said this is, this would be an appropriate point of discussion among many other things to have, after the budget's finished and after the school year likely concludes. The police department has already made clear that they think there's a few tweaks, not necessarily what Councilmember Friedson is suggesting, but I mean, potentially it's a point of conversation that is worth having in the interim between this school year and next year. There are other points around what issues get reported to the police department and things of that nature because of lessons that we learn every year. And I think there's very likely that we're going to see some tweaks to the MOU and that the way things are done. But obviously that would be something we would be in conversations with the school department, the school system with in the off season, as it were, during the summer.
Okay, and just so I'm clear, and for people who may not understand the current role of officers, does every single high school have an officer assigned to them full time? Because that's what he's asking for you.
So the way the current model works is that there is an officer assigned to the cluster. I would say that the cluster, heavily favors having the officer be at the high school, except when they're handling issues that are at the associated cluster middle school or in elementary schools. And it says that they will be there at the beginning of the day when kids are coming into the classroom, or kids are coming into the school, at lunchtime when they're leaving and coming back to the campus, and at the end of the day when they're dismissing. And the intention of that is that it gives a good conduit for students to feel like they can have an interaction with the CEO, be able to share information that they're concerned about, things they're observing throughout the school day that they want to make the CEO aware of. But during the intervening parts of the day, the CEO is not patrolling the hallways, and in some cases, maybe going out to the associated middle or elementary schools to be able to respond. What effectively I think Councilmember Friedson is suggesting is that you leave an officer parked at the high school throughout the day all the time, and you have effectively a roving officer associated with the cluster who's addressing the middle school and elementary school issues. And so again, it is effectively a doubling of the resources, and I think that's the challenge because those resources have to come from somewhere, and those would result like it's not a question of whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. It's the question of what is the collateral thing that you're not going to do in policing, and are you going to for example, I don't know what the chief would say what the collateral activity is, but you could be saying like we're not going to respond to certain calls for service because we don't have enough officers to do that and park an extra person in each cluster. And so it's the trade-offs that are the question, not independently of whether something's a good or a bad idea. We only have a certain number of police officers and they have responsibilities, and we're hard pressed to fully staff patrol services during certain times of the day, and things of that nature. And so we would have to figure out what the trade-off is in order to achieve and whether the benefits of that trade-off are worth it to the community.
Gotcha. And I promise this is the last one. They have to, by state law, have the coverage of the clusters extending to middle and elementaries, correct? That they can't not do
Yeah,
that.
every school has to have coverage, and that is not it's not specifically defined, but generally it's been thought that you don't have to assign someone to a school, but there has to be someone available to serve that school in every public school across the state.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate. Jeannie Bixby, go ahead, Jeannie.
Thank you so much. Well, Kate asked my first question, so I'll jump on to my second question. County Executive Elrich, could you talk a little bit about the significance of tomorrow's event on the transit microgrid?
Cool. I'm glad somebody likes these transit microgrids. So, it's a big deal for Montgomery County. We've put a lot of work into building these microgrids. It gives us a level of, I'd say, security for our facilities. When we had an airplane fly into that electrical tower a few years ago, the microgrid that we had up at the animal shelter was able to keep everything running when the electricity went out for everybody else. So microgrids are actually a good idea, and it's probably something you're going to see more of, over time, generally in areas, not just of the county, but I think, regionally, because they're ways of providing and ensuring secure energy delivery. For us, this is important for our transportation. The MTOC has two really cool things. It's got the solar microgrid, but it also has a hydrogen refueling station where we've got machinery we actually got from the federal government before they decided that climate change was a great thing to have. We got money for a machine that actually produces hydrogen out of natural gas. We have another place in the county where we're producing hydrogen. We'll be producing hydrogen from solar energy. So the MTOC is our big transportation facility. We've got buses there that are electric, which is where our fleet is going, and we have buses that are coming in that'll be hydrogen powered. The hydrogen powered buses have longer ranges, and why that's important to us from a transportation perspective is that because of limits on bus range, which I think will probably change in the next 10 years for sure. But the limited bus range meant that for some routes, we would have to have 2 buses a day to cover those routes over the entire day. And with the hydrogen, we're able to serve those routes with a single bus and not have to buy 2 buses. So that's an advantage for us. So I'm excited about it. I think it's the direction that things are going in. We've had funding that's helped us make these things possible, which is really important to have funding from people other than us. And I guess it's a good thing we're doing, I think. Really good thing.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you, Mr. County Executive, Dr. Stoddard. Members of the media, any additional questions this afternoon? No more questions? Then I guess we're done for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.